Madam Chair, we are now live.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Maggie Ullman, and I'm the chair of this committee, the Environment and Safety Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to our July 25th, 2023 remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually, and to help the audience follow along, I will go through each agenda item aloud so that we can follow along. We are streaming this live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there, welcome. For today's meeting, we do have an option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment, please use the same number, 855-925-2801 with meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted. You'll hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. Now I will go through roll call to introduce our committee members and staff who are with us. As I say your name, please come off mute and say hello. So Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore, welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Also, Council Member Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Also our City Manager, Deborah Campbell. Hi, Ms. Campbell.
Good morning.
We have Assistant City Managers Ben Woody and Rachel Wood with us today.
Good morning.
Maybe Rachel's not here yet, or maybe that shifted. We also have our City Attorney, Brad Branham.
Good morning, everyone.
We have our Deputy Police Chief, Mike Lamb.
Good morning.
Hey, Mike. We have our Financial Business Manager, Elise Lewis.
Good morning, everyone.
We also have our Parks and Rec Director, D. Tyrell McGritt.
Good morning.
And I feel like I see some others. I see our Police Chief, welcome.
Good morning.
And I also see Patrick Crudup from our Fire Department, welcome.
Good morning.
And I also see one of our Assistant City Attorneys, John Maddox, welcome.
Hello.
As you can tell, we have a lot to talk about today. So we have so many MVPs from across the city joining us. So with that, I will go ahead and just start jumping into our agenda. You can see we have 8 topics, so lots of conversation. The earlier ones, well, we'll just go ahead and get started. So item 1 is there any public comment to kick us off for the call today, Allison?
Yes, there is.
Fantastic.
Caller ending in 5584. You are now ready to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks to all of our city council members. The Asheville Coalition for Public Safety, thank you for your service to our city. You guys are great. We want to continue to stress that we hope the city continues to increase entry-level raises for potential APD officers to attract, recruit, and retain so that we're competitive with other nearby municipalities. I also want to continue to advocate for creating a separate committee, again, just for public safety rather than this combined committee with climate change. We call in to support the number 6 agenda item, which is the amendment to the city's public solicitation ordinance. Fantastic idea to be updating that ordinance. We hope you guys support it as well. And we also comment about the downtown safety initiative by saying, if we are able to attract, recruit, and retain our officers, we don't have to have 30-day initiatives. We can have 12 months a year, fully staffed police department, not just covering our downtown, but all of our major corridors and neighborhoods. Thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Allison, do we have any other public comment?
No, we do not.
Thank you. All right. So on to our second item is approval of the minutes from our June 27th meeting.
So moved. Sandra, I'll second.
All right. All those, a roll call vote. Council Member Smith?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore?
Aye.
Myself, aye. The motion passes. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over. Welcome, Elise. I think that you have the first 3 items, and it looks like maybe you'll be sharing all of them, but I'll pass it over to you to get us started. For those listening along, these items are the 2023 and 2024 high-intensity drug trafficking areas grants, as well as the Governor's Highway Safety Program 2024 Bike Safe Grant, items 3 through 5. Take it away.
All right, thank you very much. You can start with the first slide. So our key takeaways today, these are 2 grants that we do every year. The High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program is a grant program administered by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. The purpose of the HIDA program is to reduce drug trafficking and production of illegal drugs in the United States, specifically in areas where drug-related activities are having a harmful impact. The Bike Safe North Carolina program is a partnership with the Governor's Highway Safety Program and the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. It's aimed at reducing motorcycle fatalities. Grant funds are used to promote awareness, and the Asheville Police Department will act as fiduciary for that program. We're requesting that the committee recommend to council that staff apply for and accept an additional year of funding for the 2024 Bike Safe Motorcycle Safety Program grant for $5,000, and also the 2023 High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program grant for $154,638. We're also requesting the committee recommend to council that we apply for an additional year of funding for the next year of the HIDA program, the 2024 High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program, for the same amount, $154,638. And the reason why both of these are on this agenda this time is prior to the 2024 grant year, when the DEA agent applied for this grant, they weren't required to have anything signed. They would just submit their budget to ONDCP for approval. And once the approval was granted, then we would have papers to sign saying that we accepted it. So they're changing their policy. And going forward, every year we're going to have a request to apply for the next year of funding and then accept the prior year of funding for the grant. And then no matching funds are required by the city for either grant. Next slide. So the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant, this program is a grant administered by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. It was formed as a response to significant public health and safety threats facing the United States. Excuse me. The purpose of the HIDA program is to reduce drug trafficking and production of illegal drugs in the United States, specifically in areas where drug-related activities are having a harmful impact. And this unit does not focus on or adopt cases that are for simple possession, but it focuses only on cases that deal in trafficking, manufacturing, and the distribution of illegal drugs. Next slide. The Governor's Highway Safety Program grant is a partnership with the Governor's Highway Safety Program and the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. It's aimed at reducing motorcycle fatalities. Grant funds are used to promote awareness by contacting motorcycle dealers, clubs, and associations to discuss current highway safety activities and attend and or host training programs. We act as the fiduciary for this program, and this grant has a total of $5,000 and does not require any local matching funds. Next slide. So our key takeaways are that the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program is a grant program administered by the ONDCP. It's to reduce drug trafficking and production of illegal drugs, specifically in areas where drugs-related activities have a harmful impact. The Bike Safe program is a partnership with the Governor's Highway Safety Program and the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, and that's aimed at reducing motorcycle fatalities. Excuse me. Grant funds are used to promote awareness, and we act as the fiduciary for this program. We're requesting that committee recommend to council that staff can apply for and accept an additional year of funding for the 2024 Motorcycle Safety Program grant and the 2023 Drug Trafficking Area Program. And we request that we can apply for the additional year of funding for the following year of the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program for $154,638. And to further clarify, prior to 2024, applications were not required to be signed prior to the budget requests being presented to ONDCP for approval. And this is the reason there are 2 HIDA grant requests being presented at the same time in this presentation. And no matching funds are required for either grant. Next slide. So we request the committee recommend to council that staff apply for and accept an additional year of funding for the Bike Safe Motorcycle Safety Program grant and the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program grant. And then we request that we apply for an additional year of funding for the 2024 High Intensity Drug Area Program grant. Next, sorry. Next slide.
That's the end of the presentation.
Any questions?
Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
I have two questions, although I'm very much in support of pursuing, these requested actions, but kind of wanted to understand how long have we been running the high intensity drug trafficking area program, and or how long has that been happening? I know that we're a partner in it. And then just also understanding, like, over time, what type of changes have we been seeing in maybe the volume of trafficking and production, or the the type of stuff going on in our community. Just a little context for why we think these resources are important for our community.
Sorry, I had a little coughing fit. I know we've been doing this grant in various roles. I believe since as far back as 2010. The last, I believe, 5 or so years, we've been the full fiduciary for this grant. We did share some grant fiduciary responsibilities with an Atlanta office at one point. Deputy Chief or Chief, I don't know if you have any further history about this grant.
I know it's one that we've participated in and benefited from, especially with our partnerships within the DEA and being able to address drug trafficking both locally and regionally for a while. And of course, the scope of the drugs that we've been encountering that has increased, and it's shifted from cocaine now to methamphetamines and heroin and fentanyl as well.
Are we seeing a lot of production in our community, or more of the trafficking, or just trying to understand? Because I think they're two really different problems to solve. Are we seeing a lot of both?
So we're seeing a lot of trafficking, not a lot of production within the community. Production was something that we generally encountered about 10 years ago, especially the small mom and pop type labs, the shake and bake labs that are in people's backpacks. But we've seen very few of those now, and it's more on the trafficking side.
Thanks for that context. Any other questions or points for discussion? If not, are there any motions to move these recommendations forward?
I'll make a motion for staff to apply for and accept the 2023 High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas Grant. Should I do that separate from the bike grant?
I'll look to attorney staff if we do them separately or together.
Good evening, committee members. This is Brad Branham, City Attorney. I think you can do those together if you would like.
Okay. As well as the Governor's Highway Safety Program Bike Safe Grant.
Sandra, I'll second.
All right, roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion's passed. Thank you so much, Elise, for the update and the work you're doing. Being fiduciary is not a small role. We take it seriously. I appreciate that and look forward to just hearing the continued progress in that work.
Now, do we need another motion for the next year? Because you presented it like it was two separate
To be able to.
approvals.
Yes, we would need one for the 2024 as well.
Okay, I'll read that. I make a motion for staff to apply for the 2024 High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant. That's the motion.
Okay, Sandra, I'll second.
All right, roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
Myself, aye, and that passes as well. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
thanks, everyone.
Mhm. Okay, let's move on to our item 6 in our agenda, which is a proposed amendment to the city's public solicitation ordinances with our city attorney, Brad Branham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good evening, well, excuse me, good morning for a change to all the members of the committee. I am going to be presenting to you a couple of proposed amendments to the 2 separate ordinances that the city currently has on its books regarding solicitation. Now, I do want to mention a couple of things up front before we dive into the presentation. The first is that the 2 ordinances that you currently have on the books, which are section 11.5 and section 11-5 and 11-14. These 2 separate ordinances both cover various aspects of solicitation within the city. I will also mention that in your materials just this morning, we included, which is saved as document 7A, is actually a red line copy of both of those ordinances where you can now look at the exact changes that we are suggesting. Now, with that being said, I'm going to jump in and some of this will make more sense. Next slide, please. First and foremost, let me say that we're going to be utilizing the term solicitation throughout this ordinance, but I will tell you that the law, both in our own local ordinances as well as state law, and some case law as well, uses various different terms to talk about the very same thing. And you will see both in the state statutes and some of those other sources, terms such as begging, solicitation, and panhandling. But from a legal standpoint, this is all referring to the same thing. Next, recent court decisions that have come down specifically from the U.S. Supreme Court, notably in the cases of City of Austin versus Reagan and Reed versus Town of Gilbert, have further refined some of the law which is applicable to local ordinances that regulate solicitation. And like we do for many other areas of authority and regulation, we need to update our ordinances from time to time to make sure that they are consistent with the most recent either statutory law or case law. The majority of the city's ordinances, which is contained in 11-5, have actually not been updated in over 2 decades. So these are very much ripe for a second look and a refresh, not just because of these notable court decisions, but also because some of the language has become somewhat stale. Next slide. So the city does, first and foremost, have legal authority to regulate what the statute calls begging. Again, I'm using the term solicitation because that's what we utilize locally under North Carolina General Statute 168-179. And as I mentioned previously, the city has been regulating this practice for many, many years. Now, there is a separate statute, which is North Carolina General Statute 20-175, that deals with a very particular type of solicitation, which I'm going to call roadside solicitation. So instead of someone approaching you or standing on a sidewalk or in a park or at some other location and you as a pedestrian, these are situations where the solicitation is occurring to those members of the public who are in vehicles. So think of someone perhaps standing in median, on a sidewalk, on the shoulder, asking passing cars for donations. That is what I'm calling roadside solicitation. State statutes handle this separately, and we handle it separately. That's why we have these 2 separate ordinances currently on our books. And I'm going to lead you through the proposed amendments to each one of those. So as I said previously, there's several court decisions that have come down recently, and this is part of a broader area of case law that also helps define what cities can regulate and how these types of ordinances can be enforced. Next slide. So before we jump into the 2 specific amendments, I want to go over some important highlights. First, there are no new restrictions or expansion of the existing regulations being proposed as part of these amendments. We have already had these on the books. They absolutely are in need of updating based upon these latest court decisions. And we do have some issues that need some polishing, but these do not substantively expand the existing regulations. There are also no new or heightened penalties or violations as part of this amendment. These violations have already been on the books and we are not changing them. The changes are, however, intended to accomplish a few important things. We believe that it's very, very important to the effective utilization of regulations of this type to remove any ambiguity, to add specificity and continuity to the language, but also, as I've mentioned now a couple of times, to make sure that they are in compliance with the most recent case law and statutory authorities. So we believe that these ordinances are focused to accomplish those three things. Next slide. So first, let me dive into the first of the two ordinances that we're proposing for amendment. This is what I'll call the general solicitation ordinance. This covers solicitation of any type throughout the city, but it's not specific to roadside solicitation, okay? This is one that, again, we've had on the books for many, many years, but it hasn't been updated in over 2 decades. What we tried to do with the amendments is further clarify and simplify the language around the who, what, and when of solicitation. For instance, we have removed the term immediately, dealing with when a solicitation occurs. We think that's somewhat ambiguous. We've added an exception for asking your family and acquaintances for some money or other things. We don't believe that violates the intent of the ordinance. Secondarily, or thirdly, we've also increased the specificity around the location of solicitation, which means in some cases in our ordinance, it said within 6 feet. In other places, it said at or near a location. We've added consistency throughout the ordinances to say that it is something that takes place within 6 feet. That is not only specific, but now it is consistent in every instance so that the same rules apply in all circumstances. Now, we've also added language to clarify the restriction around solicitation at outdoor dining areas. These are the areas in the city where, especially during the pandemic, we created these additional spaces where people could dine outside in designated areas, parklets, or the like. And we want to make sure that it is very, very clear what can and cannot be done here. So instead of using general language, which was the case before, we have now stated that the solicitation cannot occur in a outdoor dining facility. That's very specifically geographically shown on the ground within the area. That's unambiguous. Or it can't be directed at people in a outdoor dining facility. So that additional specificity is important, not just to remove some ambiguous language, but it also draws a very key line between this prohibited activity and buskers. Buskers are oftentimes practicing their trade at or near an outdoor dining facility, but we don't believe that they are actually violating the ordinance. Now, if they turned around and began asking members of the public who were at an outdoor dining facility eating or drinking for solicitations, that would then cross over into a violation. But what we tried to do is much more clearly draw the line between those things so that people who are busking, as is commonly allowed, would not run into a potential violation here. Now, we have also updated the language around what we are now titling obscene or threatening language. This has always been prohibited, but we used antiquated language in our previous ordinance. We're trying to utilize the most commonly used term now in the case law that are coming out from the Supreme Court, but it doesn't change the intent and the meaning of our original ordinance. And finally, we've standardized the terminology around what is being asked for in a solicitation. So previously, our ordinance had multiple different whats when it said what you're not supposed to solicit for. And we've simply standardized that. So it's the same language in all cases, saying that it's a solicitation of any type. In the previous version, it would say solicitation of any type in one location, and another, it would say solicitation of money, goods, or services. We just want to make it consistent throughout to remove that ambiguity. Next slide. Now, with regard to the second ordinance, this one's a little more straightforward. This is the roadside solicitation ordinance that is defined in our city code, section 11-14. The language here comes directly from a state statute. And this is very, very specific as to roadside solicitation. The state tells us what we can regulate and what we cannot regulate. This is much more specific than the state law around general solicitation. So we have mirrored our ordinance directly after what we are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do under the state law. So North Carolina General Statute 20-175 tells you what you can and cannot do. We've already had this ordinance on the books, but it was very short and it was somewhat confusing. What we've done is taken the various parts, separated into separate provisions, and clearly stated this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. But it doesn't change what our ordinance previously regulated, and it doesn't deviate from what the state law allows us to do. So as I've mentioned in the slide, what you can see here, you can and cannot do in both green and red. You can solicit from the street, shoulder, or median at the roadside if and only if you have a state issued permit. So under state law, you are, as you often see, maybe the local fire department is having a fundraiser or some nonprofit organization. They go through the various steps necessary to provide for the safety considerations, and they're issued a state permit that allows you to do that kind of solicitation. You are not allowed to solicit from the street, shoulder, or median without a permit. And that covers a lot of the solicitation that I think people complain about. Now, let me point out the final one and add a little caveat to this. You can solicit roadside solicitation from the sidewalks if you are not violating other laws. So that's different. The sidewalk is different from within the street, the shoulder, or the median. Sidewalks were made for pedestrians. And due to First Amendment considerations, there's a limitation both in our case law and in the state statute that says cities cannot prohibit someone from soliciting on a roadside if they are on the sidewalk and not violating other laws. Now, I will say that although our proposed amendment mirrors the state statute and doesn't go any further at this time, there are cities around the country that have taken a different approach to this third category. And in fact, we even have one example in North Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina is another example as well. And instead of regulating the solicitor, they have regulated people prohibited people in their vehicles from giving money to anyone soliciting. So in other words, if you are in your vehicle, you're not allowed to give money to someone who is soliciting from the sidewalk, even though that person on the sidewalk is allowed to do so. Now, this does not affect someone who is walking along the sidewalk and wants to give someone money. But in the vehicle, given the safety concerns, there are statutes throughout the country that do regulate this at the local level. So this is something that if this particular body and the full council wanted to consider, we could also address that additional need by adding language to our ordinance. It is not in the current proposed amendments because we did not want to substantively deviate from what is currently on the books, but I did want to bring that to your attention. Next slide. So finally, to close this up, let me go over a quick couple of legal analysis points here. We believe that these changes, which I have outlined to you today, are not only necessary to ensure that we remain legally compliant, but also that our ordinance is defensible under these most recent cases. We also believe that the updated language not only allows for greater specificity and continuity, but removes some of the ambiguity, not just for the public at large, but for those individuals on city staff who are charged with enforcing these ordinances. We think that the updated language is consistent with the statutory authority given to us by the state legislature. And as I mentioned previously, we are not currently recommending a substantive expansion of our ordinances or any new or increased penalties. Next slide. So to close, I would say that at this point, we feel that it is prudent for the city council to take this amendment up and to recommend these changes. I would ask that this committee move to recommend the same, to move it forward to the full council for its August 22nd meeting for consideration for adoption. And with that, I'll say next slide, and I'll open this up for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Brad. I know I have some questions. Curious if my councilwomen do as well. My first question is, when I read through the tracked changes version, I noticed that there are some places where you specified 6 feet, and then there's some places relating to banking institutions where there's a 20-foot buffer. And I understand that if you're going to an ATM, you want some extra privacy. But I guess I was curious about why 6 feet and wondering if expanding that further is valuable, because 6 feet is still relatively close compared to 20 feet. It would create more distance. So curious about the why behind 6 feet and what, if there's something I'm not thinking through about expanding that beyond 6 feet, that would be a bad idea.
Excellent questions. Let me address your first one at the outset. The 20 feet radius of prohibition around a financial institution is merely because of the increased sensitivity around that. We felt that was additionally problematic to have someone soliciting either at an ATM or around a banking institution. So that 20-foot boundary has been on the books for a very long time, and it was merely because that was an extra sensitive location. The 6-foot was actually already on the books in some locations in our ordinance, but not everywhere. And because other places were a bit more ambiguous, we wanted to be as specific as possible. So we took the 6-foot and applied it everywhere, since that was something that was already in our ordinances. Now, there's nothing magic about that 6 feet. We do think that there's probably a limitation in terms of constitutionality. If we were to say you can't solicit within 500 feet of someone, you are essentially creating a complete bar throughout the city. But if we felt that 6 feet might be not achieving the necessary interest of having these particular regulations in place, and we wanted to expand that to say 10 feet, I think that's something that council could probably do.
Okay. The other question, just to make sure I'm understanding, is when I read through the detail, there was a lot of talk in one of the ordinances about the high traffic zones, which essentially looked like downtown and Biltmore Village. And am I reading it right that it just fundamentally says there's no panhandling in those high traffic zones, but for the sidewalk thing?
This is a bit of a complication of our current ordinance. So years and years ago, we put in place a differentiation between what we call high traffic zones and everywhere else. And as you correctly point out, the 2 high traffic zones are currently a large portion of the downtown area and Biltmore Village. These were identified as high traffic zones primarily because they had the highest degree of pedestrian traffic within them, okay? So in those areas, the city has increased or heightened prohibitions against panhandling and solicitation. It does not restrict solicitation outright in those areas, but it does prevent you from doing more things than you're able to do in other areas. Now, because of the constitutional protections around First Amendment, and solicitation is a protected activity under the First Amendment, we have not, even in the high traffic zones, fully prohibited solicitation. For instance, in those high traffic zones, you would still be able to solicit, but you need to hold a sign. You could not approach somebody and verbally solicit, but you are able to hold a sign asking for donations if you're not breaching any other regulations, like if you're not too close to a financial institution, if you are not doing it after dark, or any of the other very specific limitations that are already on the books. So you can still solicit in the high traffic zones. And it is because of the First Amendment protections coming out in some of these big Supreme Court decisions that says that is a protected activity, but we have limited it to the extent we are able, because those are the high traffic pedestrian zones where we have the most possibility for safety issues.
Okay. Vice Mayor Kilgore?
Yes. I'd just like to know, basically, when we talked about the high traffic areas as being downtown and Biltmore area, is it any way we can, because basically things have changed since then. Of course, West Asheville is a high traffic area, more so I would say than Biltmore. So I feel that it should be included, and also maybe even the River Arts District. So how are we looking at those as becoming part of the high traffic areas?
Thank you for that question, Vice Mayor.
Yes,
Let me say that we in the city attorney's office looked at the possibility of expanding or adding new high traffic zones. Now, we have not proposed that currently. And the reason for that is we wanted to bring up the proposed amendments that we feel are most necessary for you, given the most recent court decisions, and use this opportunity as council being able, from a policy perspective, to dive into these types of considerations. And if council would like to add or expand those high traffic zones, that's something that is within your purview. We would want additional input from other city departments like APD, like transportation, perhaps, and some of the other areas that could give us additional input, and that not come purely from the city attorney's office. And I do see, speaking of that, APD has raised a hand, so we may want to bring them into the conversation.
Yeah, I think APD would concur with the vice mayor on the situation on Haywood Road, particularly in West Asheville, for certain.
Vice
ahead.
Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead. He can go ahead. Okay, I was just wondering, with that being said, Brad, would it be something that we could consider as adding into that motion so we don't have to go back and revisit it?
yeah, absolutely. Our goal is to bring you something that is essentially a non-substantive but needed amendment and allow you to be not just aware, but give consideration to some of these additional proposals, which you may or may not want to advance forward to the full city council. I would say among those are first and foremost the Chairman Ullman brought up, perhaps increasing the distance around solicitation, currently 6 feet, maybe advancing that up to say 8 to 10 feet. Also adding additional high traffic zones. I'm hearing maybe Haywood Road in West Asheville or the River Arts District or both. And also again, on the roadside solicitation, if you want the consideration to add in any sort of prohibition from the operators of vehicles actually giving donations to anyone participating in that process because of safety hazard. Those are the big three things that I've heard so far as being identified as possibilities. And whatever motion this group would like to make, feel free to add in those additional provisions. This matter will not come before City Council if you advance it until August the 22nd. And because it includes penalties of a criminal nature, it will require 2 readings at Council. So you'll be seeing this likely in August as well as early September. We have plenty of time to go through the exercise of adding in additional provisions as you would recommend for consideration.
Thank you.
I'd be curious kind of to talk to, like, I wish we were in the same room. I'm looking at both you councilwomen of the idea of prohibiting giving money from a vehicle. I guess my first thought when I was jotting my notes down was, I don't know, I know that sometimes the folks who are panhandling are in really dire straits, and the acts that they're taking are uncomfortable and in many places unlawful and infringing on other citizens' rights. But I also know that just charging them in the misdemeanor isn't necessarily going to address the root cause. And so the fact of this well-intended generosity, I mean, my 9-year-old daughter wants to hand a snack out the window. It's coming from a really good place, but I don't know if it's helping address the root cause, and it might be reinforcing these, what I think are dangerous activities. And so, you know, whether it's adding a law that you aren't allowed to give money or us really digging in with community partners. I remember maybe 20 years ago that we had a Can You Spare Some Change for Real Change campaign. And it was a community campaign to really promote this concept that if you'd like to give money, give it here, and this place can go to the nonprofits that are providing the support services. So the tension between carrot or stick in ultimately trying to lift up a community conversation of, is giving handouts, is giving a fish really addressing this problem for those in need and making us safer, or is it perpetuating behaviors that aren't really safe for us? I mean, I feel like that's a conversation I think that we should all be having.
Why don't we just designate that one part to the high traffic areas, because it's really not safe for that type of activity, that type of exchange. Until we kind of put some deeper thought into whether we just want to prevent it outright.
I like that idea.
And if I can add, I don't want to get outside of my own minimal field of expertise, but as you mentioned, Chairperson Ullman, what a lot of cities who have implemented these kind of specific restrictions around this roadside solicitation have done it in conjunction with a very public communication plan that directed an alternative giving option. They would put up giving boxes that would be donated or funneled into nonprofits who actually provided services and shelter operations to say, give to this as opposed to these situations, so that you are trying to capture the good faith and good intentions of those individuals and give them an option that is more, not just directed, but much more controlled in its use of those funds.
Yeah, it makes me think of our first public comment today. I know the Asheville Coalition for Public Safety has really been working hard in the community, bringing people together who are concerned about safety, and they might be a great partner to talk to about something like a community campaign like this. And there might be plenty also.
And if I can, to Councilmember Smith's point regarding the location of these particular ordinances and the high traffic zones. It seems and APD may be able to comment on this better than I. In fact, I'm sure of it, that many of the complaints that we are receiving around some of the roadside solicitation does seem to be occurring outside of what is currently designated as the high traffic zones. We've had 2 or 3 locations that seem to get some of the most or highest level of complaints. So I would note that adding these sorts of additional restrictions against giving roadside would not hit some of the hotspot areas. And again, I would defer to APD on whether or not they would agree with that.
Can I ask another question concerning that point? Are the complaints about safety of drivers and pedestrians, or are the complaints just about the nuisance of it?
So, Councilmember Smith, it's a variety. Sometimes they reference the traffic hazards that they create. Sometimes they border on common law robbery, depending on the behavior of the person that's asking for the money. But then sometimes it's simply a nuisance complaint. But Mr. Brandon's right. It is all over the city. Wood Avenue, South Tunnel Road corridor, Exit 44, Airport Road, Hendersonville Road, Merriman Avenue and Chestnut. It's throughout the city where we generally get the complaints.
And Councilwoman Smith, I like that suggestion of the high traffic zones, but I wonder if broader is more useful. When I think about the personal experiences I've had when I'm driving, it is often outside of the CBD.
Well, it seems like the feedback that we just got from our officers would support it being outside of the high traffic zones, because that's where the volume of complaints have come from. But I'm down with increasing the distance, expanding the high traffic zone, and regulating giving. I don't know how we're going to frame it. Giving from car operators. I'm down with the direction we're going.
Yeah, I am too.
Well, if there are no other questions, again, I'm happy to answer it. Vice Mayor?
When Councilwoman Smith was just talking about the things that we sort of agreed that we need to actually make those changes. Is that something that we should probably send over that proposal over to council or full council like we're doing now? It says, to move it over, or should we actually revisit it here in environment and safety to actually sort of horn in on exactly what we want to say before moving it to full council?
I say we kick it forward and see where that conversation goes, because they could add more to the research, and it might come back to this committee naturally. So let's not delay. Let's move it forward and see what the larger body wants to say.
Okay. Sounds good.
I would also ask that I agree. I think we can collaborate and mold it, knowing that it's not necessarily a impermanent marker, but here's our starting thoughts. Anybody have other thoughts? I also would wonder if staff could, in concert, when we bring this to full council, toss out some suggestions for how kind of, we look at this from the lens, Manager Campbell, that you always talk of reimagining public safety and what role the community plays. Because I do think we know that just changing an ordinance doesn't necessarily change a culture. And so what are the steps we could look at for a community campaign, or what partners might there be? Just what does that look like as well to really reinforce if we were going to change the ordinances themselves, which I'm in support of us talking about with full council.
And then kind of give more clarity about the protection around buskers.
Manager Campbell.
I think that you all have taken a fairly significant step as it relates to public safety for both those who are soliciting and those that are being solicited. I do think, though, that like with most things, we're going to need to do an education, outreach, marketing, and we can use Rotary clubs. We can use a number of different nonprofits to help us communicate about this ordinance and the need for us to change behavior. We are evolving. Our community is evolving, and our needs to support this population, unfortunately, that has to solicit, we have to support them in a different way. And I think what you all are doing is a commendable step, and I really appreciate the initiative that the city attorney's office has taken. They started out with kind of the minimum, and I think you all have built upon it and improved these changes in an extremely compassionate way. So thank you.
Hold on, I just had an afterthought. So how do we enforce the roadside solicitation when it's on like a state-owned right away?
That's an excellent question, Councilmember Smith, and APD can probably again give the very best answer. But let me say that although there are multiple state roads within our jurisdiction, they are within our jurisdiction. So there is a certain amount of overlapping control enforcing local ordinances. And the state essentially has state troopers, which are tasked with enforcing rules on state highways. That's a very limited and sparsely divided force. So we would be able to maintain the enforcement of our ordinances from a legal standpoint, whether it is on Broadway or 52 Merriman. And those are one city road and one state road. But in any case, being within our jurisdiction gives us that control.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the proactivity. Any other thoughts? All right. I look forward to seeing more and really talking about this with the full council. And like you were saying, Deborah, I think going and talking with Rotary and, as this moves forward and if there's questions we have, we want to suss out with the community, or as we figure that out, I think this is a great place that we can all put in some elbow grease and put some time in to really kind of rally the group around what is safe for everybody, including those folks who are out in the medians in really unsafe conditions. Okay.
Chair, before we move on, if I could ask just so that we can, for our records and minutes, ask for an actual motion to be taken to give the direction we need.
Sure.
Go for it, Maggie.
I was like, can I do that as the chair? I make a motion. I'm going to see. I feel like you probably said it in the PowerPoint. So hold on one second. Oops. Of course, my internet is very slow.
And Allison, could you bring up the end of the PowerPoint?
Oh, that would be.
You got it?
Probably quicker than me.
Yeah, let's see if Allison can bring up the.
Oh, I found it. Oh, well, there we go. Tie. Okay, there you go.
That one. Thank you, Allison.
So I'm going to add the things we talked about on the fly. So hopefully it meshes nicely. I make a motion to recommend and move the proposed non-solicitation ordinance amendments forward to the full council for consideration at its August 22nd meeting, to include adjustments to increase the distance from 6 feet to 10 feet, to add a high traffic zone in what staff recommends along Haywood Road in West Asheville, and to prohibit giving money from a vehicle.
Second.
Brad, I see you.
Right, you're on mute.
We can't hear you.
My apologies. Just for clarification, was the River Arts District also to be included in the high traffic zones, or just?
Yes, I think it should be.
Okay.
Agreed. So the motion adds to add a high traffic zone in the River Arts District and West Asheville upon staff's recommendation of which roads, et cetera. And with that, do we still have a second, Shanika?
Second.
Roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Look forward to talking about this about a month from now with council. Okay, now we're gonna shift gears a little bit to talk about the Parks and Rec Master Plan, with D. Tyrell McGirt.
So good morning, everyone. Committee Chair, Vice Mayor Kilgore, Councilor Smith. I'm D. Tyrell McGirt, Parks and Recreation Director. Purpose of this presentation is just to give an update on where we are in the comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan process. Next slide. Just a reminder, the last time the department went through a comprehensive master plan process was back in 2009. Because we know the city is preparing itself for a bond initiative coming up in 2024, and because it's been a number of years since we've last had an update to the Parks and Rec master plan process, staff initiated the process in hopes of getting our act together, understanding what the priority needs are within the department, understanding better what the community would like to see in their Parks and Recreation, which initiated the process to move forward with a master plan. In January, an RFP was put out, and a consultant was selected in February. And you will remember in March on the 28th, we had a couple of things happen in this council meeting that kind of came before you all presented the process, what we're looking to accomplish, what we're looking to get out of the master plan. And then that evening, council approved the contract with Design Workshop based out of Raleigh to be the developer of our system-wide master plan. Today, I'm just giving an update on where we are, some milestones, and we'll take a look at the timeline and some upcoming things that will be happening with the master plan. Next slide. Just to review, the purpose of this plan is create a vision for the enhanced Parks and Recreation system that meets the needs of current and future Asheville community. This ties in nicely with the council priority of improve and expand core services. Next slide. Some things we're looking to get out of the master plan. One, we'll take a look at all recreation that is happening within the Asheville community. The contractors will come in and assess that, both public and private, so we can have a better understanding of everything that exists within this area. We know we want to equitably prioritize programs and capital investments that focus on our existing parks and facilities. So this is an emphasis. We know when we go through a master plan, there will be a lot of new and shiny things that are recommended. However, with this process, the focus is on our existing parks, existing facilities. We want to promote new ideas, partnerships. Part of the assessment of recreation activities in the area is also looking at what are some potential partnerships. What does it make sense for us to join forces with some other entities that are already existing in town? And of course, innovation is at the forefront of these conversations. What does that look like in this field of Parks and Rec? Provide sustainable practices and strategies that fill in the gaps by design recreation needs. We want to understand what makes sense for Asheville Parks and Rec to focus in on. We know our focus is community recreation, but what is our lane? And then lastly, to educate the public and build community support. As we go through this process, it'll be a number of opportunities where we're educating the public, answering questions, making them aware of everything that we do. What does community recreation truly look like in here in Asheville? Next slide. This is a timeline of the process. Right now, we've already held our kickoff meeting with the contractors. It was important to us to have this process stretched out over a year. This is a tool that we're going to be using for the next several years, 10 to 15 years. So we don't want to rush anything. So taking our time, really being thorough through the process, having a timeline that allows us the time to do so was important to us as we were putting together this process. Right now, this summer, the contractors are taking a look at all of those documents that we provided them with. They're touring our facilities. They're meeting with staff. We're meeting with them almost on a weekly basis, reviewing policies, and again, taking a look at overall what is here in Asheville, what does Asheville have to offer. We're hoping to, by the end of this year, around the December, January timeframe, have a better idea of what the plan recommendations are going to be and be ready to, in the spring, start implementing some of the strategies that are being recommended. Next slide. Here's the project timeline. You will see right now we're in the phase 1 of the process, community needs assessment. So what that's going to look like for us over the next few weeks is really doing a lot to prepare for some comprehensive public engagement. That's going to include coming up with branding, developing a website for this project, developing the citywide survey that will go out to kind of survey, pull from the community what they'd like to see in their community parks and recreation, meeting with different focus groups. Focus groups will include both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, and pulling all of those pieces together and synthesizing that information. So we're in the process of putting that together now. During the months of August and September will lead up to this public engagement piece. I do want to point out that we know that our CAPE department will put out a community survey. I know that our economic development department is going to also have a project where they're going to be soliciting feedback from the community. And we know Buncombe County Parks and Rec is also going through a master plan process too. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for the public to provide feedback on their local government operations. So we will work collaboratively with CAPE, with economic development, with Buncombe County Parks and Rec on how do we present this information to the public in a way that's easy to understand. They recognize that these are city parks, these are county parks, this is what's being asked, so that we're not confusing people when we're going out and trying to pull all this feedback from the community. Next slide. Again, our purpose is just to provide an update on where things are. Consultants are working steadily. We're meeting with them almost on a weekly basis, and we hope to have them out here at some point during August and September to help us with the community engagement piece, which is next on the list. Happy to answer any questions that you all may have about it. You can go to the next slide.
Thanks to you, Tyrell. Any questions or comments from others?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know how to say it exactly, so I'm just going to shoot. I'm just wondering, like, during the community engagement process, if you all put targets on the subgroups that you want to reach out to, like our elderly community or families with kids under a certain age or youth, have these subgroups so we know that we have representation from a broad voice and not just like one area of people who would probably be most accessible to take a survey.
Yeah, that's a good point. We will have stakeholder meetings with external groups. So yeah, we have a pretty extensive list that includes youth, seniors, teens, young adults, people that live in different geographic areas, people who have different recreation desires and how they recreate. So athletic groups, youth athletic groups, we've identified all of these external stakeholders, and there will be an opportunity where we pull them together in one meeting and kind of hear from them on what they'd like to see in their Parks and Rec department.
Okay, cool. But I think my question is more about like, if you don't have a great volume of folks in one category, will you continue to work before you go to your game planning?
Mm-hmm. Yes. We evaluate. I don't, yeah, it's, you know, when you start engaging in public feedback, you never know what you're going to get. Certainly there are certain stakeholder groups that are more organized that we know if it's pickleball, they're going to be there and happy to provide their feedback. But yes, there will be some groups. There would be teams, for instance. It would be hard for us to kind of pull and solicit information from them. We'll put the extra effort and energy into making sure that we have good representation at those stakeholder meetings. And it won't be just one way where people can provide feedback. I mean, we have these stakeholder meetings, but we also have the survey go out. There'll be paper copies. People can jump online. There'll be a number of different ways that people can provide their feedback.
Fantastic. I was waiting for pickleball to be brought up. We need equal pickleball and tennis input. Am I right? I see what you're getting at, though. I'm being playful, but yeah, I think there's just a lot of folks that really rely on this amazing park network and programming network. It's so meaningful. I mean, right now we're in the heat of summer programming for so many kids right now that the city of Asheville is a part of their family right now as parents are working and hustling. So it's exciting. Appreciate it and look forward to the leadership. I know, Tyrell, when we've chatted, you're bringing a real vision to our community and a depth of experience that I think having a plan like this that is supported by the community is just such a fantastic way to really let your leadership shine. And this will give a lot of tools for the community to come together. Manager Campbell?
I just wanted to just reemphasize a point that Dee made early in his presentation when he said about a focus on existing facilities. That is going to be a recurring theme as it relates to capital improvements in our community, of looking at our existing facilities and resources. And we know, as he said, the nice, shiny new things are always get people excited, but we have assets that we have to reinvest in and protect that investment that are currently in communities. And we need to make sure that we are providing good quality facilities and upgrading again those that we already have.
It makes me also wonder what you're speaking to now, Deborah, which, you know, I 100%, I'm with you so much on maintaining the awesome facilities we have as best as we can. It also makes me think of some of the work that this committee has talked about with our recent adoption of the Municipal Climate Action Plan, and how in that program it talks about resilience hubs, which makes me think of our park buildings, our libraries, even some of our churches. I think that so much of what Parks and Rec can do is foster and support through the public little heartbeats in every neighborhood, and what services those look like, that I wonder, as we get further along in our Municipal Climate Action Plan, if and where there's docking and overlap in the parks master planning to looking at resilience hubs and those facilities that need to become these real safety net places, or expand even further to be better safety net places. So I don't know how, when, if that fits in a master planning process, but I see real linkages there, and planning is the perfect time to kind of think through some of that so that we don't later go, oh, these puzzle pieces don't fit. That would be such a missed opportunity.
And it is definitely not 100% there yet, but our culture is to collaborate, to make these linkages, to connect dots, to leverage, to build upon one initiative to see if there are opportunities for multiple things to be accomplished. So totally agree with you, Chairman Ullman, that going to be a lot of connecting the dots, in addition to the sustainability and climate action plan, but our emergency operation plan. I mean, utilizing our centers for those emergency hubs as well. So I think Dee wants to speak, if that's okay, Ms. Lynn.
I was just going to add, part of what we've tasked the contractors with is taking a look at all plans. So yes, the climate action plan that we currently have in place is one of those documents that they dive deep into, looking into the work that the Reparations Commission is doing to make sure the equity piece is also included in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, along with innovation and making sure that the focus is on community recreation, as well as maintaining our current existing parks and centers. So yes, Councilwoman Ullman, the climate action plan will be looked at also.
Exciting times. Any other questions or comments? Thanks for joining us and keeping us in the loop, and look forward to the next turn of conversation and all the engagement times that our community will be invited into. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. We are moving right along. Fantastic. So our second to last agenda item, number 8, is a downtown safety initiative transition with our assistant city manager and our deputy chief, and maybe others, but thanks for bringing this to us. I know that we had set out for the 60-day initiative that was, May and June, and that excitedly we have full support to continue this initiative. And so excited to see some of the data and their performance and kind of have that conversation of where we go and what's next. Vice Mayor Kilgore? Let's go. Oh, I was like excited. Let's go. But yeah, thanks for bringing this. I know that some of this conversation, the Downtown Commission was presented with this information in Leadership Asheville. So really glad that we at Council are having this conversation and hearing the same information and moving it forward. So I'll pass it to y'all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ullman and other members of the Environment and Safety Committee. Ben Woody, Assistant City Manager. We've crossed the noon threshold, so I'll now say good afternoon. And yes, that's correct, Councilwoman Ullman. This is a similar presentation that we've done for other groups and advisory boards. So I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly today. I also have Deputy Chief Lamb that's going to take a portion in the middle. So I will transition to him. So again, this is our downtown safety initiative, and we're going to talk a little bit about today what we've done with that. Some of the takeaways, things that we've learned along the way, and then just want to inform council and the community of kind of what to expect moving forward. So again, just a quick reminder, this was a 60-day initiative that was launched on May 1st of this year. It was a multi-departmental effort with a high level of focus on safety, cleanliness, and assisting individuals in need. And it was focused on our central business district, which is our downtown area. So next slide, please. Our key takeaways is we have transitioned. We're out of the 60 days that ended at the end of June. So I'll cover a little bit today about some of the enhancements that have come out of that. Also talk about some of the ongoing and continued services that we'll continue to see in the downtown area. Again, to reiterate, this was based on the premise that public safety and cleanliness is a community-wide responsibility. And that we've made considerable headway in understanding and addressing those needs in our downtown area. Safety and cleanliness conditions, continue to be prioritized. They always have been and they continue to be. And then finally, staff is continuing to assess resource needs and partnership opportunities to continue to enhance our level of service in the downtown area or anywhere really for that matter. So next slide, please. So again, I think it was a great takeaway, and what I'm really proud of our organization for doing is really the multi-departmental effort this took. So again, this was a number of departments that came together really to try to address these conditions in our downtown related to safety and cleanliness. A big element of that is being proactive. So this is the city trying to be out and be proactive to address concerns or to provide a higher level of service. We had a lot of community participation. We're thankful for that. Our community members helped with reporting issues, adopting crime prevention strategies. We did a number of public safety assessment walks that I was a part of, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to walk and be out with our community in downtown and understand their concerns and ideas. And also we did a number of community cleanups, and you can see the picture here. I think this is one of our public safety walks. You see a lot of people in yellow vests. Did a lot of cleanups as well. That included business owners and residents and city staff. Next slide, please. One thing that we did that's I think really evident and shows the amount of work that went into this, and this is on our project page, and really down at the bottom of this slide, you can see a link to the project page, but we also tracked everything that we did. We wanted to show the community, here's what we did, here are the actions we took in this 60-day period, so you can see what that looked like, and not only see the staff that were out, but actually understand what was happening in that 60 days. And just to highlight a couple of things, we had 8 volunteer cleanups. More than 4,000 graffiti tags were removed. I still can't believe we did 4,000 of those in a 60-day period, but we did in the CBD. APD, same, just incredible what they did. 463 verbal warnings were issued. You can see, and I want to point to the community support. We had our APD staff. They made 888 business contacts, which is just amazing to me how much they put into being out in the community. You can see our pilot program, our community responders. This number is going to look bigger on a slide in a second, but during that 60-day period, they made 361 proactive contacts with individuals that may have been in need of assistance. They had 85 responsive interactions. And again, you can see these wellness checks. So again, really just represents how busy and what staff is doing in this 60-day period. If you go to our project page, you'll see a lot more numbers and data that kind of shows that. Next slide, please. So just to take a second to talk about our community responder program, and I know we've got Assistant Fire Chief Krudick on the call if there's any questions on this, but this was a pilot program that launched on May 1st. The idea is that this service fills in really a gap in providing, and this is really the key part, is a proactive assistance to those that may be in need. So these are individuals that are out and amongst, the downtown area and trying to provide proactively assistance to someone that may be in need or appears to be in need. Our responders also provide a public safety presence. They're in uniform and they are public safety officials and they give that presentation. Again, they help people in need. That's everything from as simple as making a phone call from somebody to setting up a ride for somebody to get to an appointment, even as far as to getting people connected to shelter, clothing, and mental health assistance. So the type of services that these employees are able to provide is really amazing and phenomenal, and they truly are out amongst people that may be in need, as well as talking to our business community and making sure we're meeting their needs as well. The other thing about this program, it's been so successful as a pilot, and it is ongoing and continues. They're actually, initially we're focused in the CBD, but now you can see on the heat map, so the map there, you see the big yellow heat area in the middle is the CBD, but you can see that their community responders are starting to get outside of the CBD a little bit. So you can see they've made some contacts in West Asheville. They've made some contacts around the Tunnel Road. So again, you can really see this program beginning to kind of flourish, not just in the downtown, but other areas as well. As of the date of this, which I think was a couple of days ago, we're up to 550 events, 449 are proactive, 100 are responsive. So again, they are a busy group of community responders. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pivot to Deputy Chief Lamb. He's going to take the next few slides and talk a little bit about APD's takeaways from the 60-day initiative. So Deputy Chief Lamb, if you're ready, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great, Ben. Thank you. All right, next slide, please. So what we'll look at now is the data surrounding APD's proactive presence in the Central Business District during the initiative. So the first chart you see there is non-officer initiated calls for service. So these are calls that came in through dispatch that were given to officers that came from the public. And you can see there that the calls for service slightly increased, but not a lot from the previous year, from 2022. And looking at the next chart, you can see that is officer initiated calls for service. So those are events that officers initiated themselves. And you can see that the self-initiation increased significantly. So, that's from where officers generate foot patrols, public contacts, but also witnessing crimes in progress, which we will see in the next slide. Right. Next slide, please. So first we'll talk about violent crime. This is a question that we've had about the initiative is with officers downtown, why has violent crime increased? Well, that's due to the fact that with the increased presence of officers downtown, that officers again are witnessing crimes in progress. So they would see an assault with a deadly weapon or some type of violent crime event that happened and then interdict, do the investigation and make the arrest. And so that is, and these are based on events, not on calls for service. So that's basically an officer taking a report, doing the investigation, and then following through with that investigation and either issuing a citation or making an arrest. The next block is property crime. Property crime increased 33%, and that is, again, for the same reason, is that with that increased presence, officers are witnessing crimes in progress and therefore doing more reports, doing more investigation, making more arrests. One example of this is I was downtown at Pritchard Park one of the evenings, and a business owner flagged us down about a larceny that just occurred. Well, whenever we intervened and found the offender, she happened to have stolen goods from two other businesses. So that became 3 separate incidents in property crime, in addition to the fact that she had methamphetamines on her. And so she was arrested and is still in custody. Next slide, please. And this is our arrest by week. So look, you can see during the initiative, our arrest increased based on the 2022 numbers. So, they were up towards 16 during week 19 and then around 17 during week 23. And this, again, goes back to the increased proactive presence of officers downtown. And, it also gave us an opportunity to take some of those key offenders that were doing really outrageous behavior downtown and being able to take them in custody. So that's the last of my slides, and I'll pass it back to Ben. Yes, Vice Mayor, I'm sorry.
I was going to point out, when we go back to the slide, if you notice that basically what you said, when you all started the initiative, how it went up, the arrest went up. But if you can see how, because of the presence there, it started heading downward very quickly as far as the activity.
Yes, that is correct. Just a change in behavior and
exactly within that short period of time, being able to see that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out. I was just okay.
Yeah, we're optimistic now. We're only 19 days, I think, past the initiative, 19 or 20, but thus far, based on our crime stats, both property and violent crime within the reporting area within that central business district is down. So we're hoping that's lasting.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take back up if we can go to the next slide. Again, I want to thank Deputy Chief Lamb and Captain Stepp and the Chief's office for all their work and being proactive and being a part, really a leader in this initiative. So what we learned, and I'm going to kind of wrap up the data piece here, we'll move into some other things, is I think we learned that proactive engagement and presence by law enforcement, by our community responders, it really is needed. It helps us to address many of the complicated factors that we see in our city. We also know that community support and engagement is also needed to interrupt these patterns of violence and reduce crime citywide. And finally, just kind of looking at the data, we also understand the value in the interdepartmental coordination that happened, those relationships that we were able to form, and how we were able to more efficiently deliver services. So again, a good opportunity through the 60 days to kind of evaluate a lot of what we do in terms of service delivery and how we do that. So if you'll go to the next slide. So 3 slides real quick, kind of now what we've heard from the community through this 60-day initiative. A lot of this is anecdotal. You know, we just have conversations just like council does and hear from business owners and residents. But we're also going to talk a little bit about a survey instrument that occurred. So generally the feedback's been positive. People downtown like to see the level of service. They like the proactive approach. I think the cross-disciplinary effort has been appreciated. You know, there's still some things that we can do better with, and we're working on those. We want to make sure that city staff and leaders are accessible to our community. We want to make sure our businesses know how to access tools and services that they need. And of course, and I'll talk more about this shortly, we want to make sure that there's an easier path to get to city staff or to ask about a service. And we have some thoughts on that as well. Next slide, please. One thing that we were able to do is ADA, Asheville Downtown Association, they do an annual survey, and they usually review those survey results at their State of Downtown luncheon. But we were able to work with ADA to do a follow-up survey administered toward the end of the 6-day period. So we wanted to check back in on some of the earlier survey results that came out earlier in the year. And ADA, they administered this survey and helped with this. But we were encouraged by a couple of things. We still have work to do, but we were encouraged. You know, one is downtown safety remains one of the primary concerns for downtown businesses and residents. But we did find in the 60-day initiative that fewer staff and customers expressed concerns about feeling unsafe. We found that a higher proportion of respondents feel safe during the day. So that was a improvement. And then we found that a lower proportion of respondents feel very unsafe at night and actually feel more neutral. So we made some progress. This was the one survey instrument we had access to. And of course, we have the anecdotal information we get from people as well. Next slide. Don't want to forget about the cleanliness piece of this either. And again, overall respondents rated downtown as cleaner during the 60-day initiative. Cleanliness remains, though, one of our most pressing infrastructure priorities for our downtown moving forward. So we've heard that loud and clear. And then we've also recognized that the need for lighting has increased in importance. I think that's because we spent a lot of time in this 60-day initiative looking and talking with residents and businesses about lighting. So I think there's an acknowledgement of how important that is in the safety of our downtown. So if we can go to the next slide. So that kind of captures our feedback loop. My last couple of slides are the big question of, well, what's next? And so everything is going to be next because we're going to keep providing the services that we have been. We're committed to that. I just want to talk a little bit about that real quickly. We've learned a lot in this 60 days. We are able to continue many of those services at a high level. We've learned how to collaborate and do that. A couple of key things I want to hit on. APD and community responders will continue to prioritize a proactive presence in the downtown area, as well as in areas where data is showing increases in crime. And I think that's really important that both those agencies, departments, they really are looking to use a data-driven approach to maximize the resources they have. Good example of that is, I just want to touch on an example real quick, is we have our Carter Ann Street area, which is just west of downtown. So our data tells us there's been some criminal crime increases in that area. What we're able to do is, where we do see areas such as that are experiencing increases in crime, is city staff can continue to have that proactive public safety presence. So that's one piece of it. But the other thing that we can do is also work with our community partners, in this case, such as Homeward Bound, who are, as a result, are actively adjusting their operating hours and their service model at the AHOPE facility. They're also discussing adding additional security measures at that location. And again, that is part of the community response to increases in crime, and also part of our response to try to maintain that proactive presence where the data tells us we need to be. Other services in terms of what the city's doing is we want to prioritize those lighting improvements. We want to continue to monitor street light outages. We want to create a system to track those, make sure we're getting lighting like improved, replaced, added where we can do that at. Parking garage safety, that's another key issue that came up. We've increased our frequency of parking garage patrols. We're installing new cameras in these garages to improve safety. We're also in the process of contracting with security services, again, to help make sure those garages are a safe environment for people. Next slide, please. Addressing homelessness, we want to implement the recommendations of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, restructure the leadership and governance around that issue, enhance our outreach, improve our encampment response, try to increase shelter capacity. All those things are important to try to manage the homeless population, the unsheltered population that exists in Asheville. Cleanliness is huge for us. We recently, we have a new on-call contracted service for biohazard cleanups. We have a contract where we can respond to cleanliness issues that have a biohazard component. We have 9 full-time staff devoted to downtown cleanliness. We work on graffiti abatement, vegetation control, street sweeping, code compliance, just general cleanup. We have a contracted service where we continue to provide downtown cleanliness services through that contractor, such as litter pickup, vegetation control, pressure washing. And we also have, through that contract, what we call a hotspot cleanliness contract, where we can deploy that contracted service to kind of a hotspot or an area in need as it comes up as an issue. Parks, D. Tyrell's on the call today. He's worked really well with his team to increase our park security coverage to 7 days a week, including evening coverage in the summer months. And then finally, to kind of close a loop I mentioned earlier, we have a new constituent services manager in the city manager's office, Stephanie Gillum. And so again, she provides a single point of contact for people in the community. Also, she's able to create systems to track and make sure we're responsive to inquiries we receive. So next slide. So that's a review of the ongoing services that the city's going to continue. Kind of last thing, and just as important, is what can the community do to help with this as we move forward? Number one is you got to let us know. Continue to report issues and concerns. We do receive those. We pay attention and we will respond. Help us. It's a community. It's a complex issue that requires a community solution. Consider what you can do as a member of the community. Maybe it's organizing a cleanup. Maybe it's supporting a nonprofit, or maybe it's joining one of our advisory boards and being a part of this. And then finally, we're doing a lot of good work as a community. Looking forward to continue the efforts that are underway and support a safe downtown and city as a whole. And next slide, which is my last slide, is our key takeaways. And again, I think I just want to reiterate that these services, what we've done over the past 60 days and what we've learned, we will continue to leverage and provide moving forward. And again, we need our community to be a part of that with us. That concludes my presentation. Deborah.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to add is my sincere gratitude to first the staff, but also to the community as a whole. But I want to just, if I could, with liberty, just shout out one individual. Dana Frankel was our project manager for this effort. And will continue to be engaged, not sure at what level right now, but I just wanted to mention her, as well as my assistant city managers who played in a role as well, Ben Woody and Rachel Wood, who supported the effort as well. But again, this was an interdepartmental effort, And this is how we are going to move forward with everything that we do. Because these issues are so complex. They're holistic in nature in terms of all of the different kinds of things that need to be addressed when we are dealing with community issues. So again, appreciate the work of the staff, but also the community who joined us and I think are going to hang in here with us moving forward in terms of assuming their role of being a part of making this a better and safer community. So thank you. And thanks, Ben.
Thanks so much for this update. I know, yeah, it's just really helpful to see the big picture of how it went, where it's going. And then I really especially appreciate the last several slides, Ben, that you shared that looked at the holistic approach, because as we've talked about for a long time, reimagining public safety has a lot of people involved, our police department, of course, and a lot of others. And so really looking at the things that we're doing to address some of the roots, just really good context for us to always remember. And the progress, I think if a media outlet wants to run with some of those crime numbers, it only takes one second thought of, yeah, of course we saw some things shift because we were out there so much more. And we know that presence is a huge preventative and a way to interrupt some of these issues. And so I think all the data that you shared makes a lot of sense. And I think actually indicates that we're moving in the right direction, even if it might look like there might be more crime. I think it's just more that we're involving ourselves in it to be addressing it more directly. And I think that's a positive sign. Yeah, curious if there's I have one question. I think that all of where things are going is really fantastic. Of course, you see progress and you say, great, I want this everywhere all the time. And I also know we're human and we're doing a really good job and there's only so much advancement we can do at different times. But curious if some of the stuff maybe around cleanliness or other support services would be expanded at any point to other neighborhoods where we're seeing issues like West Asheville and Haywood Road. So I know, just curious to hear what that looks like. And then also, I know it's been since this spring, since we've had an update on all the hard work APD is doing around rehiring, but I'd love to I know that each season we kind of go through some more training courses. And so I'd love an update in a future meeting on where we are on vacancy rates and how we're doing building back, because I know that's been a really focused effort. And so just that piece of the puzzle would help us understand too, how I continue to see what I'm hoping is a turning point and we're moving in the right direction. And so understanding the piece of the puzzle on how we're restaffing our department would be helpful at a future meeting as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this topic today? All right.
No, just appreciation.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, thank you for being here for that update. I appreciate it. I will move us to our last and final agenda item, which is the second phase for public comment in these meetings. Allison, do we have anyone on the line for the second public comment?
Madam Chair, we are showing 2 callers. I will open the line now to the caller ending in 2265. You are now unmuted.
Wow. Hi. I called enraged, and after listening to this meeting, that was just a night and day experience compared to the last time I bothered to tune in. Thank you all so much for supporting our APD. Thank you, APD. I've noticed you all patrolling more, and I'm seeing those blue lights, making your presence known. I really appreciate that. So I'm feeling really encouraged after listening to this meeting, but the reason why I called is we're having a lot of issues over here in West Asheville. We had, so my house is kind of like way off the main road and we're surrounded by woods. And I was sitting out on my swing at 11 o'clock Sunday night and had a man sneak up on me. It was beyond scary. We've already had issues with vagrants in the woods and people throwing trash and using our property to cross over. We actually have an entire camp building next to us. All these issues, and I didn't feel compelled to report it. You know, we're just dealing with it. I mean, when that man snuck up on me, I just basically chased him off my property with my pistol. Last night, I talked to my new neighbor that just moved in. She's talking about these vagrants coming up here, you know, spilling her water from her water hose, knocking on her door. I mean, she just moved here. She's already afraid. She didn't feel comfortable being armed. So I gave her my phone number and told her, call me, you know, if she feels threatened again. So I've just got to be a good neighbor here because, you know, we haven't felt empowered to even bother reporting. I mean, our police are so low in force. The rhetoric against them is just appalling, you know? So, wow, after hearing this meeting, thank you. I can't applaud enough. I really support expanding our high traffic areas. That's a great idea. It's a good place to start, really. It's a good starting point. It sounds like we're on the right track. But yeah, I mean, we've got problems here. And the last time I bothered to call in was when Roni was still on there, and it was just a joke. It was just a joke. So whoever's responsible for her not being involved, first of all, and just the general rhetoric and conversation and the way that it's turning, I applaud you. I'm feeling much more encouraged to report. It sounds like, you know, they need us to really. So if I'm not reporting, if my neighbor's not reporting, who else isn't? How much worse is the crime really? We were talking about building fences. We just can't afford it. It'd be nice, you know, to have a big fence around our properties, but I mean, we don't have the money for that. You know, it's ridiculous that I was literally missing meals to pay my tax bill this year, and I'm dealing with these problems in this city. But anyway, regardless, thank you. It sounds like we're on the right track. Thank you, APD. Y'all have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye.
Caller ending in 0852, you are unmuted.
Yes, hello. This is Jensen Gelfand. I live in West Asheville. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to just give feedback on the meeting and around the solicitation conversation. I just wanted to put my voice out there as somebody who enjoys interacting with all members of our community, and I actually have developed and enjoyed rich conversations with folks who are maybe soliciting. And, you know, if we force these people off of our, you know, sidewalks, you know, go from 6 feet to 10 feet, we're just forcing these people further into invisibility. You know, they're already forced into the in-between spaces in our community. And the fact that we have so many people who need this kind of help in our community, I think it's important that we don't make them invisible. I think it's okay for people to ask for money and for somebody to say yes or no based on whether they can, whether they're okay giving it. I think that putting these people into invisibility is going to further harm them and will further harm all members of our community. It's a reminder, we have a lot of work to do in this community for equity and for raising up those who are the least among us. We have a lot of wealthy members of the community and we have a lot of resources, and we can be putting more resources into supporting our unhoused populations and those in need. And there's some great things like the Beloved Street Pantries out there, which is another way for people to directly give to our needy populations without, if they're not feeling comfortable interacting with someone, you can just put something into one of the many Beloved Street Pantries out there. And also, just wanted to also talk about the Downtown Safety Initiative briefly. It just feels like, you know, adding people with lethal force in our community is not going to solve any of the core problems. And anytime there is somebody with a gun and an adversarial interaction, something can go wrong. And people can get hurt. So, it doesn't really feel like that's going in the right direction. I know there are people without guns who are being included in the downtown safety initiative, such as firefighters, but firefighters are not trained at their core to be doing this work. They're trained to fight fires, and it feels like we need more people who are trained in mental health and helping people with substance issues and doing the work that allows people to connect to resources, highly trained professionals without guns downtown and other areas that need it to help folks. So that's my 2 cents, and thank you.
Thanks to both the callers for joining and listening and sharing today.
Madam Chair, we did have a third join. Caller ending in 7629. You are now unmuted.
Hi. I was calling in. I really appreciated the comments of the last caller. I just continue to be really concerned about how we're treating people in our community who are the most in need. This new solicitation ordinance is really concerning to me because I think we can see that folks in our community are really suffering. And if we want to create true safety in our community, we would take care of those folks. We wouldn't make it even harder to survive. We're already making it really difficult to survive by making it basically illegal for people to have any place where they're allowed to exist in our community. And gosh, just on a personal level, it really is disheartening to see that so many people, can see this kind of suffering and say that doing violence onto these people by criminalizing them, by incarcerating them is a solution, because it really just, it isn't. Taking care of people is the solution. On this agenda, we see even more money going to police. We see police claiming that crime is up because they are doing these wild crackdowns. I just saw 7 cops the other day when I went to go get ice cream, and everyone was talking about it afterwards. They are, every time I go out in my community, I'm seeing cops harassing other people in our community in a time when people are in deep need. And the solicitation ordinance is, I'm assuming you're bringing it back up again because you're going to include this as part of, the further crackdown on low wealth people in our community. And I know just based on the conversations that I was hearing outside of me getting ice cream, that there's so many people in our community who don't see this as a way to make us safer. That it isn't working, and police are falsely inflating these crime numbers by their very presence, and then they're trying to justify their existence through that. They seem to just keep getting more and more funds from you all, and we all know the state of of people in our community who are really, really struggling, and it seems also just like the rhetoric that's so dehumanizing around these people is really concerning to me, because I think that many of us are a lot closer to finding ourselves in a similar position, as I've had conversations with people about how one injury, one medical bill, one car breakdown.
Thank you,
can change someone's life.
It's completed.
Thanks for that call. As you know, we have a limit to 3 minutes for input, hence ending at that time. But Grace, if you wanted to share any further comments in writing, please do. Are there any other callers, Allison?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, that is our last agenda item. Unless there's further comments or discussion from the committee, we can move to adjourn. All right. Do we have to do a motion to adjourn? I don't think we do. We just call it a day.
I think you can adjourn within your powers, Madam Chair.
Well, fantastic. All right. Well, heavy conversations. Those public comments brought up a lot of feelings and a lot of reflections. I really, really appreciate people being part of this conversation with us. I think there's a lot more conversation to be had about several of the topics we had today. So I look forward to all of us as a community moving in that direction to discuss and work this through to be safer and healthier for everybody. With that, I will see everybody later at City Council tonight. Take care. Thank you.